Good day, everyone, and welcome to the All Societies platform of the American Ethical Union. I'm Chandra Sears, a member of the Baltimore Ethical Society and president of the board for the AEU. I'm so grateful to be here this morning and appreciate y'all making the time to be in community as well. I am also grateful for our platform moderator today. Joe Farkas is the newest candidate in ethical culture leader training. He works closely with the Chicago Circle and is collaborating within the AEU to increase outreach to young adults. Thank you for your service this morning, Joe. I also extend a special welcome to our guest, Seth Andrews, who I think needs no introduction as the thinking atheist. He has been a clear and influential voice within the secular movement. He'll be sharing his thoughts today on why facts don't change minds. And this is a particularly relevant topic given the current national and political climate. Today, I'll open with a poem by the Reverend Dr. Pauli Murray, who was born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1910. They were a 20th century human rights activist, legal scholar, feminist, poet, author, Episcopal priest, labor organizer, multiracial, Black, LGBTQ+, and an all-around remarkable human being. They were the first Black person to earn a JSD, a Doctor of the Science of Law degree from Yale Law School. They were a founder of the National Organization for Women and the first Black person perceived as a woman to be ordained an Episcopal priest. Murray's work and lifelong activism influenced the civil rights movement and expanded legal protections for gender equality. And now for Pan. I did not know when I had climbed the hill, past cruel rocks and thorny underbrush, that I should find so desolate a place. There land ended on barren cliff. There's earth and sea embraced, in perpetual union of tenderness and strife, unyielding stone against relentless wave. There was the loneliness of God molding the first small world in mist and flame. I would have fled the awful emptiness had I not seen you standing there, poised lightly as a gull on swirling surf, bright promontory of defiance, your arms flung windward, your hair a golden pennant. And though no word was uttered above the tumult of advancing tide, you came uncalled and placed your hand in mine. There on the furthest rim of earth, we stood, my hand in yours, your breath upon my cheek, our wild, impatient dreams thundering echoes of the flood, our laughter mocking ancient shibboleths, shattering boundaries of space and time. Beloved comrade, high-hearted rebel, if I had paused, let wisdom shield the vulnerable heart, I would have walked a safer path, crept blindly underground, and never glimpsed your shining essence, earth-trapped star on lonely height. And now I turn the program over to Joe Farkas. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra. Welcome to the American Ethical Union's All Society platform. I'm Joseph Farkas, a leader in training and chaplain at the Chicago Ethical Humanist Circle. I'll be introducing and moderating the platform today, The Brick Wall Brain with Seth Andrews. For those of you joining us today who are new to ethical culture, the ethical culture movement is a moral and educational movement founded in 1877 by philosopher and scholar Felix Adler, which aspires to create, nurture, and inspire ethical humanist communities to foster a world that is democratic, compassionate, just, and sustainable. Adler was one of many thinkers of his earlier and later times to put into words and practice that morality and values-based community does not need to come from religion. In fact, the most important tenets of a just, compassionate society can be inferred by individual reason, observation, and empathy. We strive as a movement to learn and grow in our love for the other and ourselves, challenging lingering assumptions and beliefs that threaten our ability to uphold the dignity and worth of every human being. We gather in communities like this to enjoy the special space and time that comes from knowing those around us aspire to bring out our best. It's a community and feeling we aspire to share with everyone. The platform today is the brick wall brain. Why aren't facts changing minds? During the global pandemic that claimed over 7 million lives in the globe, Americans made up 17% of the dead, but only 4% of the global population. Many of us witnessed firsthand the intensity of science denial that went into resisting even common sense precautions to prevent the spread of the disease. Alarmingly, this science denial was further capitalized upon by major companies eager to avoid further losses from reduced travel, reduced dining out, and working from home. Emergency medical personnel watched in horror as isolation times, sick leave, and mask mandates at businesses gradually shrank to pre pandemic levels, even as the United States continued to lead the world in COVID fatalities. For all of the evidence available to people and the obvious dangers of ignoring it, some people still insist that it was all a hoax. It goes nothing to say for issues that don't risk imminent death, but about which there's a wealth of scientific research, historical data, and publicly available information. The rights of the LGBTQ plus community, women's health, gender and racial justice, workers' rights, climate change, and many others. Even as COVID gravely threatened human life on Earth, climate change threatens the entire biosphere. How do people refuse to accept facts and question their own uninformed opinions when their lives and the lives of the whole planet depend on it? Maybe more importantly, how do we, who are trying to reach them, break through? Seth Andrews is an American activist, author, and speaker on atheism. He hosts the award-winning The Thinking Atheist podcast, Its Community, and has written 4 books. Prior to this career, he was a member of a fundamentalist Christian community and a Christian radio host of 10 years. Seth brings these experiences and his experiences of becoming an atheist to us today as he discusses how the brick wall brain resists facts, clings to beliefs without evidence, and persists even in dangerous errors. I hope everyone joining us today learns not just how to spot these behaviors in others, but in ourselves when we're hiding behind our own brick walls in our brains. Afterwards, we'll have some breakout sessions to discuss the talk. Everyone, let's give a warm welcome to Seth Andrews.
Good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be a part of this and to have been invited. You know, I like the temperature of the ethical society, which really unites people by values. We can talk about theology and we can talk about philosophy and we can talk about all these other things, but so often we tend to partition ourselves off. And when it comes to ethical living, ethical behaviors, when it comes to what our values are, so often these are uniting things. And, you know, it's funny, many of my I'm an atheist activist, former evangelical, but many of my most beloved allies out there in the fight for democracy and decency are themselves devout religious people. We disagree on theology, but we share values. And I like that big tent approach. And we can have the discussions about everything else a little bit later. Today, I've got a presentation, though, about ideas and about changing minds. I'm going to go here to sharing my screen with you. Hopefully, you can see a copy of my logo in full color. And I'll begin with a picture of a dog. Now, we have always been told that dogs are colorblind. This is not true. Dogs can see color. They actually have a much more compressed color range. Their eyes evolved for distance and motion, for hunting, usually in the low light of dusk and dawn. So they didn't need to locate bright fruits and flowers and that kind of thing. This is my own hunting dog. This is Linus. He is one of our rescues. He's a little 7-pound Maltipoo. He's fast. He's ferocious. He is obviously a descendant of the wolf. And, you know, and I was relieved when I learned that he actually does have color in his life. It's not the same color that we see, but it's color. Now, here is what dogs see on the right side of your screen. A dichromatic image with the reds and the greens compressed down so that the dog sees more a mix of blues and yellows. I mean, it's pretty cool. And when I learned this, I was like, wow, you know, I've expanded my knowledge base. I am altering how I think about this. It is a myth that if you swallow your gum, it stays in your stomach for 7 years. That is not true. It's something our parents taught us. So if you swallow your gum, it's going to stay in your stomach for 7 years. No, no, it passes through like any other food. That's a revelation, and I make the adjustment in my brain. It is a myth that coffee dehydrates us. Caffeine itself is a diuretic, and that increases urine production. But you're still drinking with coffee something that is almost all water. So you are hydrating while you are caffeinating. Well, that's knowledge I need because I'm a coffee drinker and I've got my coffee cup right here. Did you know there is no conclusive proof that sugar causes hyperactivity in children? And even among my fellow skeptics, this is where some people say, uh-oh, right? They're sitting forward in their chairs. Why would we react here differently than we might react with the colorblind dog and the swallowed gum? And yet the statement is true. The National Library of Medicine declares, despite what most parents think, there's no conclusive evidence that sugar causes kids to act differently. The hyperactivity connection was actually made in one study that was done 50 years ago. It involved one doctor removing sugar from one child's diet. And this has not been conclusively replicated. Sugary foods are part of other environmental triggers that might be responsible for some issues. There are some kids with sensitivities to sweetness. And while that is the case, the sugar hyperactivity connection exists mostly here in our perceptions and our brains. Now, a few people might be saying, wow, that's interesting. I will change my perception, but I'll bet there are some others who are like, Seth doesn't know what he's talking about. You know, we've seen our kids eat sugar and they're maniacs. I've seen it happen, you know. Well, let's take a look at some other long held beliefs that may not get us all hot and bothered. Did you know that our blood is not blue when it's in our bodies? I used to think that the blood was more blue in the veins, and then when exposed to air, what we were seeing was a trick of light, really. Red goes deeper and it gets scattered into skin and fat. Blue gets bounced back from the skin to our eyes. So we're perceiving more blue in our veins, but the color of the blood has not changed. Polygraph tests do not work. They just don't. I was watching Mindhunter, which is one of my favorite series on Netflix. I watch the series all the time, even though there's only been 2 seasons, and they constantly invoke the polygraph test. I'm like, polygraphs are debunked. This is 19th century technology. You cannot determine lies by measuring blood pressure, breathing, pulse rate, perspiration. No. According to people like this guy, former NSA, National Security Advisor, analyst Russell Tice, even if the needle did tell a real story, let's say it did work, you could cheat it. You could fool the polygraph with a few exercises. Bite your tongue, you could distract yourself, mental arithmetic, daydream, alter your breathing, or even tighten your rectum. You can tighten your rectum and change and fool the sensations that drive a polygraph test. And I know you're trying it right now in the privacy of your home, and it's okay. There's no judgment here because I did the very same thing, right? Well, this will come in handy if we ever end up at Gitmo. We know how to fool a polygraph test. It is false that you should never wake a sleepwalker. The truth is, they're probably much more at risk of getting hurt if you let them pinball around. Asleep. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine says no, no. If you can, gently guide them back to bed, but if you have to, wake them up. We do not want sleepwalkers going up and down stairs and leaving their houses. Some people have even got behind the wheels of cars and driven. They've driven asleep. We do not want this. We need to wake them up. Good information, and so we change our minds and we know more. It is a myth that touching a baby bird will make a parent abandon it. Birds are bonded to their young. So the whole idea actually links to an old myth that birds can detect human scent, or they have really intense olfactory organs. Most birds have a very limited sense of smell. And again, they're bonded to their chicks. So while we shouldn't be bothering the babies, if one of them falls out of a nest or gets in danger, rescuing the chick is the right thing to do. The baby will not be left behind. And that's good news because we all love rescuing animals. Monosodium glutamate, MSG, in food is not bad for you. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Now we're back to something that we've long believed, or many have long believed, and it rattles our cage just a little bit. Monosodium glutamate is a flavor enhancer. It is added often to restaurant foods, canned veggies, soups, deli meats, and more. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has classified MSG as safe. It is safe, all right? So there's no discernible link between all the things that MSG is supposed to produce: headaches and sweating and tightness of skin, numbness, fluttering heart, chest pain, being weak and sick, and all those things. No. They tested MSG in labs and said people responded the same to MSG as they did to placebos. Now, there's no reason to have that no MSG sign on the door. There's we love this Chinese restaurant. It's about 3 miles down the road. They've got a no MSG sign right on the front door. Now, this is a marketing thing because they know a lot of the people who walk in are freaked out about the idea of MSG, and have the pro MSG or anti MSG people change their opinions based on the FDA findings. Let's go deeper. MSG is not just in Chinese food, which is a common misperception. It is in canned veggies, ketchup, mustard, salad dressing, deli meat, potato chips, soup. You and I eat MSG all the time, and we don't even realize it. Now, glutamate is an amino acid that is present in almost all of our foods. Monosodium glutamate is an isolated and purified form of it, right? So glutamates found naturally. You'll find them in cheese, fruits, veggies, chicken, shrimp, shiitake, mushrooms, broccoli, walnuts, cabbage, on and on and on, right? Well, monosodium glutamate, this sort of concentrated version, increases our saliva, and that improves taste. It can be a little bit salty, but still it has about a third of the amount of sodium as regular table salt. So unless you have a specific and rare sensitivity, you wouldn't feel any health effects from MSG until you'd eaten 3 grams or more and done that on an empty stomach. That's about 6 times the MSG that is in most foods. And even then, your symptoms would be pretty mild and they would quickly disappear. This is the scientific finding. Now, this is where everyone stands from their chairs and applauds me. Thank you, Seth. Thank you for bringing this fresh perspective rooted in good science. Let's go get some chicken chow mein together. Is that the response that I would get if I was to take this presentation out to the street corner and give it to everyday people? Probably not. They would say that MSG has obviously shrunk Seth's brain. I refuse to put that in my body. Well, what's that about? Why the pushback? Why are people so indignant, even irritated at the idea? And if you want to see irritation, check this one out. Detox diets are a scam. Detox diets. Detox is not a medical term in the context of diet. This term was hijacked. It was stolen from legitimate addiction recovery programs to sell the myth that you can eat and drink toxins that have accumulated in your system. Now, notice that the people selling this claim don't talk about what those toxins actually are, okay? The liver is our detox machine. It's built in. It does what it has evolved to do. Detox by diet is a bogus claim that is made by a totally unregulated $50 billion a year detox product industry. Aha, the skeptic says. That's something that the FDA would want us to believe. I still believe detox diets work, and I will not change my mind on this. Some of this attitude relates to what we call the reiteration effect because we've heard it so often, right? Repeated exposure makes it true. And one of the examples of this is that people have always believed that Napoleon was short. This is just an example from the Thinking is Power website, which I love. So Napoleon was short. Someone says that's interesting. Napoleon's shortness complex was massive. Did you know Napoleon was short? And the response is you probably heard that a lot, but it's a myth, right? Now, are we willing to change our minds there? Napoleon wasn't actually short. We grew up. We were taught that his lack of height made him a mockery throughout Europe. But the inch, as measured in France at that time, was actually a different measurement of inch than that of England. Historians say he was average height, maybe even a little bit taller than the average Frenchman at that time. Okay, fine, we may change our minds on Napoleon, but what about this one? Mother Teresa may not have been a very good person. Now, when I say this in our culture, I make that statement. People will go from, that's interesting, to how dare you? They just literally become indignant, like have insulted one of their children or their mother or something, because Mother Teresa has so long been branded into our minds and linked to notions of purity and grandmotherly goodness. But why do people get so upset, right? I'll follow up with this question, or actually a few questions. I'll say 3 facts. Tell me 3 things about Mother Teresa that you know that have nothing to do with that, the fact she was a Catholic and that she was born in Calcutta. Okay? That's it. So give me 3 things, or even 1 thing. Just give me 1 example of something you know. I swear to you, over the last 10 years that I've tried this, nobody knows anything. No one's able to say anything except she was a nun, she's a Catholic, and she did good works. And they can't tell me what specific good work she's actually done. It's wild. If I talk about her real life, which was hugely problematic, in her life, she preached all the time about rigorous poverty, but she lived like a freaking rock star. She was wined and dined and jet setted all around the world. And she had access, when she got into ill health, she had access to the most advanced medical care. But she talked about poverty being a good thing. And suffering was much like the suffering of Jesus Christ on the cross. The poor benefit from God loves their suffering. She founded a tremendously problematic organization called the Missionaries of Charity. And I did a whole speech on this called The Mother of Bad Ideas. Must have been 10, 12 years ago. We talked about the unsanitary conditions, people handcuffed to their beds, in syringes washed with tap water, non-physicians giving medical care, but often not appearing for weeks at a time. It was just literally a warehouse of suffering. And even the miracle, quote unquote, miracle that produced or qualified her for sainthood was manufactured by the church. And the woman who was supposedly healed, once they got Mother Teresa sanctified and given sainthood, they ghosted this woman. The Catholic Church stopped returning her calls even when her life became problematic because they had no more use for her, right? All of this marketing, right? Marketing the sainthood of Mother Teresa by the church and our blind acceptance of it, and then our rabid defense of it. We close our minds. Very few people want to hear the truth about Mother Teresa because she's kind of an adopted mother into our hearts, branded onto our identities. And we want to believe in the saints among the sinners out there, don't we? We want to believe that good people exist doing good things. That story speaks to our humanity in many ways. The COVID vaccine is safe and has saved millions of lives. Joseph referred to this a few minutes ago, and I so appreciate that. You and I are taking this journey probably on the same page, but we can all think of people who would just walk out of the room. But let's say they didn't. Let's say they're right here and they're like, okay, I want to know more. So we present some data. The Center for Disease Control reports that you cannot get COVID from the COVID vaccine. A lot of people say this about the flu vaccine too. I got the flu shot, then I got sick. I was given the flu by the virus or whatever, by the vaccine. There's no live virus in the COVID vaccines, and vaccines don't shed their components. The components themselves are safe. You'll find those ingredients in many of the foods that we eat every single day. It will not alter your DNA. I don't know if you've heard this one. I don't want my genes, mutated by the COVID vaccine. The vaccine never goes into the cell nucleus where DNA lives. It never even gets there to do that. It won't make women infertile, which is one of the claims out there. Danger. Pregnant women should never get the vaccine. No, they should get vaccinated. Not only will the COVID vaccine not microchip you, it contains no metals, which can even produce an electromagnetic field. Bill Gates is not tagging you so he can watch you sit on the toilet and go to the mailbox. What a relief that information is. And now we're seeing something beyond the reiteration effect. A lot of people hear it, and they hear it on Fox News and Newsmax and OAN and right-wing radio and all these sort of fear-mongering platforms. And so they start to embed it in their brain. But then we see opinions that get tattooed onto our personal identities. And COVID has become hugely political. It becomes a statement about us, who we are. So accepting or rejecting the reality of COVID and the vaccine has become a statement about us and who is a danger to who we are. Resistors and disbelievers have often been primed to see an evil scheme out there or an attack on their freedoms, even if they thought COVID was somewhat dangerous, maybe. The greater danger is the threat to us, who we are as Americans, to our freedoms. No one is going to tell me, the free American, what to do. For many people, they perceive this country as rugged individualism, which is a myth, by the way, right? It does take a village. No one is an island unto themselves. Collectivist values, working together as a society, that's problematic, and it sounds suspiciously like socialism, which I think the idea of working for a collective good makes us the Soviet Union or something, Government mandates, those are tyranny. My identity as a free American is never, ever, 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 right? It's like that sign with a big snake on it that says, "Don't tread on me." So everything becomes about our identity. Now I'm going to show you kind of an intense photo here real fast. Smallpox killed over 500 million people last century. One of the most contagious and deadliest diseases ever known to humankind. English scientist Dr. Edward Jenner proved that if you inject somebody with a mild dose of cowpox infection, you could inoculate them. You activate their immune system, which is what vaccines do, and then you can inoculate them against smallpox. Within 5 years, his vaccine had gone global. But even then, anti-vaxxers freaked out, and they went full on anti-Fauci on poor Dr. Jenner. Here's a depiction of Dr. Jenner. This is meant to ridicule him. He, in the drawing, is vaccinating people. And look at their faces. Once he injects them with the vaccine, they start looking like cows because he has tainted them with cowpox. Here's a cartoon. This dates back to 1802. It has children being fed to a diseased cow-like monster. The cockpox solution was coming for their children. So it's fear, it's disinformation, it's conspiracy theory, science denial, public endangerment. That sounds wildly familiar today. And that was a 19th century movement. It was a culture. It was an identity. Here is another example. Mid-20th century, 1950s, new seatbelt requirements were met with rabid opposition. People said belts are more dangerous than crashes, and more importantly, nobody's going to force me to wear a seatbelt. Nobody's going to force that on me. I'm standing up against this tyranny. And this takes us into another fallacy, the false equivalence fallacy. It argues two or more things are the same thing. So if I stand up and say I'm not going to do a seatbelt, then I am a resistor. I'm kind of a hero of history. I'm not standing up for my right not to wear a mask, or I'm standing up rather for my right not to wear a mask, just like Rosa Parks fought for her rights. Masks take away our freedom. They obviously want to invoke the Nazis, which we see people do, right? Vaccine passports, they're like the Star of David that Jews were forced to wear on the Holocaust. And I will stand up and resist as a human rights champion, the just against the unjust. This is kind of the attitude out there. Now, there's so much psychology behind identity beliefs. It feeds on us and it feeds into us in so many complex ways. COVID resistance specifically, it says, I'm smarter than all those sheeple out there. We've outsmarted the scientists and all their blind subjects. There's a lot of sowing of ignorance, fear, distrust. Uh-oh, science is imperfect. It's changing from time to time. It goes from here to there. Therefore, you can't trust science or scientists. Totally flaky and unreliable. There's the correlation causation problem. Uh-oh, Bob got the shot. He had a heart attack a few days later. It must have been the vaccine that killed him, right? Being able to find hidden patterns or not so hidden patterns. This is what makes us the super sleuth, which really speaks to our identity as clever people. You got conspiracy theories. Would you rather be with the empire, or would you rather fight with the rebels? And of course, the good guys are the rebels. Many conspiracy theories sort of speak to that hero narrative, or we're smarter than everybody else narrative. That really feeds the ego. Attacks on freedom. Nobody can force me. The free American, certainly an identity. And in our convictions, we will join with others who validate us and reinforce us. They feel the same way. And there's a kind of dogmatism that kicks in. So, let's say that you're an anti-vaxxer and maybe you're introduced to the evidence that you find compelling and you think, maybe I do need to get the COVID vaccination. And you say something to your in-group. You run the risk of something called social death. And I think Joseph spoke to this as well. If you shift your opinion, if you dare to doubt, disagree, go against the tide, this, in many ways, is an affront to the group who may then reject you for non-compliance. And of course, if you're not in, you are out. This guy's name is David McRaney. He is got a podcast and a book called You Are Not So Smart, and this one called How Minds Change. And he wrote about a guy who was a 9/11 truther. 9/11 was all an inside job, thermite controlled demolition. It was all, George W. Bush's, it was blood for oil, whatever. And that he believed that the families paraded on television were all crisis actors, and it was all theater. But he was then introduced to the victims' families, and he was shown the evidence, and he changed his mind. He came to this moment of epiphany. He was like, whoa, wait a minute. And for changing his mind, not only did his group turn on him, but they went out and went after his family, and they posted online altered photos of his children and compromising situation. I mean, they just went after him. They literally tried to ruin his life. And you can imagine with that kind of pressure why some people are afraid to speak out and say that they've dared to disagree when they have been part of an identity group. I mean, what is flat Earth if not an identity? It's a sense of community, but also superiority, right? Not just a conclusion that you make in the brain. It's a sense of self and family, and we surround ourselves with those who validate that. We can understand then why so many flat earthers are maddening to talk to. What's the psychology here? There's a documentary that released on Netflix 6 years ago. It's called Behind the Curve. It may still be streaming if you want to go check it out. And it showed a group of flat earthers, and they decided they were going to prove it once and for all with an experiment. So they went to point A outside, and they took a laser and they shot it out in a straight line. And then over here, I forgot what the distance was, but they had a reception point, a target. And these were equidistant off the ground. I'm putting my hands hopefully together. And it was going to show that the laser met the target at the exact same height off of the ground. But what happened in the experiment? It did not meet the bullseye because the laser was much higher, because the Earth is not flat. Did these flat earthers change their minds? They did not. They said, we're going to go back, and we're going to come up with a different experiment that will give us the results that we know are correct. They were going to go and they were going to fabricate an experiment which gave them the answer that they had already assumed and were protecting. I need a new experiment. That's fascinating. This is the 2018 Flat Earth International Conference at Crown Place Airport Convention Center in Denver, Colorado. The MC was on stage and he was telling the crowd, I am not ashamed of ridicule. Talk about serving the self. I really feel like a hero. I'm not ashamed of ridicule. I'm not ashamed of mockery. I'm not ashamed of insults. And the crowd went crazy and they cheered him. Yes, yes. You're the hero we need. We are also not ashamed of ridicule, mockery, and insults. Now, this sounds familiar to me. Right? I am not ashamed. Does that ring familiar to you? Because as an evangelical, I'm reminded of that verse in Romans, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. It is the power of God to salvation to everyone who believes, right? I'm the mighty oak. I'm unwavering. I am solid. I'm reliable. I am not ashamed. Now, I'm going to come back to religion here in just a second, but we see this kind of thing all over the human psyche, in all kinds of causes and beliefs. 9/11 was an inside job. I believe it with all my heart, and I am not ashamed. Aliens live among us. I believe with all my heart, and I am not ashamed. Chemtrails are mind control drugs being showered upon the commoners by the government. I believe it with all my heart, and I am not ashamed. There is a secret cabal of Satanist Democrat blood drinkers trafficking our children out of the basements of D.C. pizza parlors. I believe it with all my heart, and I am not ashamed. We are a Christian nation, founded for Christians. I believe this with all my heart, and I am not ashamed. What is that, if not an identity? I just released a speech that I did on the Capitol steps in Phoenix, Arizona. You might want to check out. It runs about 20 minutes. It's called Jefferson's Jesus. And you can just YouTube search it, Seth Andrews, Jefferson's Jesus, where I totally dismantle the lie that the founders were all Christians who wanted a Christian nation. That is fiction, but it is an identity. Now, I'm not saying that all tribes or in-groups are bad things. We have evolved to be communal creatures. We're societal animals, we like to have families, and that's cool. I mean, what is this group, if not in some ways a meeting of my people? We come together to share time, share ideas, enjoy each other's company, even online. But how often then do our opinions become branded onto our person? Here's an interesting example. And when I first wrote the speech, we hadn't seen the election happen yet, but I think it's still relevant. How do you feel about this guy? I used to buy into the boy genius, but I've since altered my perception on that. And these days I find him tremendously problematic, as we have seen the American assault on democracy and decency. But I don't want to talk really about Elon as much. He's kind of my introduction to the electric car. I know there have been Tesla protests. Have you seen stickers like these that are more and more? One guy's making $100,000 a month printing and selling stickers like these that they can put on their Tesla. It says, I bought this before we knew Elon was crazy. He's cleaning up. I think he's on track to make, $500,000 in the next few months. Anyway, but the EV, the electric vehicle, let's talk about that because I think it's cool. All right. I dig the idea of the electric, whether it's the Hyundai Ioniq or the Ford Mach-E, the Chevy Volt. I test drove a Mach-E last week, and they're cool. They're cool cars. And I don't kid myself that I'm a great environmentalist. I'm not this guy for considering an EV. Fossil fuels at this point still drive the grid that charge the cars. We're still trying to figure out lithium mining and battery lifespan, recycling, disposal. All that stuff plays into it. So it's not like you're a hyper environmentalist. They do burn cleaner. And I think we need to be looking at new technologies. But beyond those discussions about gas versus EV, I've noticed something interesting where I live in the red state of Oklahoma, smack dab in evangelical red conservative Oklahoma. I've noticed something. In this oil and gas state, there seems to be a lot of Oklahomans who apparently have married car and truck exhaust with their notions of freedom. It's not just what they think, it's who they are. So let's say I meet this guy on the sidewalk, and I hope this isn't a cliche, but let's say I meet this guy on. Actually, let's say he's driving down the road and he's sitting in an intersection with a window down. And he's got an F-150, a Ford truck, and he's cruising along. And I start talking to him about electric cars. I'm interested in the reaction because, from my perspective, it seems to be this kind of thinking. Some people, I think in this country believe that the gas vehicle was invented here, so that feeds into their notion. That's not true. Carl Benz patented the first gas vehicle way back in 1886, and this is a model of what that looked like. But, tell me that these gas-powered trucks don't just look like America. And you start that word with an M, capital M with apostrophe in front of it. America. How about this truck? Stars and stripes. Oh, red, white, and blue. That's America. Or this one, complete with all, you got Trump and the flag and all that. You got we the people, the Constitution, ironically plastered on the side. That's America. This is an identity and an identity culture. And I find those freedom convoys fascinating because you never see an EV. Whenever you see these types of convoys going on, it's not like you see somebody in an Ioniq who's cruising along behind all the flag waving trucks. Now, again, I might be stereotyping, but I would like to think as an Oklahoman, I've got some equity in these discussions to talk about it. So take it with a grain of salt, but take it if you will. If I see somebody driving around with this symbol, whether it's on their car or whatever, I see that symbol, I'll bet you I can tell you 20 other things about that person. Would they ever drive an EV? Oh no. What's their political party? Almost certainly Republican. Ethnicity, best guess would be white. Religion, Christian. Favorite news channel, Fox News. Did they get the COVID vaccine? Don't you bet on it. Do they accept the climate science out there? No. Well, how do they land on reproductive choice? Probably not. They probably go, hashtag pro-life. How do they feel about immigrants and immigration? Gun owner? Nationalize healthcare? One point after the other. You can almost draw a picture, paint a painting of what that person guesses. I'm guessing, maybe stereotypes, but I think it's legitimate to observe and address trends and tendencies, right? And I would bet, as somebody who lives right here, smack dab in Oklahoma, that if I see that symbol, I'm talking to a white, Christian nation, free market, oil and gas, love it or leave it American conservative. They're weird about gay people. They're distrustful of foreigners. They probably have an equal number of Bibles and guns, maybe more guns. That's an identity. Now, the thin blue line symbol is actually a response to another identity group. I'm not making an equivalence argument here. Black Lives Matter. I'm not saying Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter are the same thing or have the same amount of merit. I think these are different discussions, but it's true that BLM does speak to an identity. I think BLM has more merit for me, because it speaks to my values, something I feel strongly about, condemning racism and abuse within law enforcement and the culture. And the true claim is this: Black people, people of color in general, face greater danger against police brutality. The system is broken. It needs to be fixed. Bad cops need to be rooted out, fired, prosecuted, and education and our procedures need to evolve. I don't find that controversial, but some do. So the thin blue line symbol is a response, a tribal response to Black Lives Matter. It says, no, no, you are vilifying all police. Our men and women in blue need our support. Blue Lives Matter. By the way, this symbol has interestingly become the darling of many white supremacist groups. I'm not saying everybody who flies it is a racist, but I'm saying that it's interesting to see them adopt it. The Back the Blue identity group makes this blanket statement that we should stand behind cops, period, whatever. And BLM protest against police racism are a betrayal of all the police. This binary thinking, right? Tribal thinking, just versus unjust, all nothing, A, B, black, white, yes, no, good, evil. And some of my fellow lefties came up with this tragic campaign, defund the police. They didn't even properly define what many meant, which was we need to reallocate some resources, so that the police with lethal force weren't dealing with social issues that didn't require police. But I found this a tremendously problematic part of some of the responses to police and their response, right? Binary thinking, the tribal thinking, we're just, they're unjust. And there were a few people who wanted just to pull the plug on the entire police department model for the entire country and then reappoint other people to be police, which would be a police department. Whole other conversation. Okay, there are 700,000 police officers right now in this country. Like almost 750 million. And there are far too many instances of racism and abuse by those in uniform. And there are many, many good, moral, hardworking people in uniform doing a difficult and dangerous job, and they deserve to be recognized. Both things can be true at the same time. But if our opinions are reductive, binary, if they're simplistic, if they're nothing, if they're everything, if they're us and them, then tribal teams, this becomes a major problem. I'm going to skip past a few of these slides that I had used of tribalism because I think you get it. But we got into, tribes, whether it's religious, whether it's cultural, even tribal sports teams going after each other. Here in the state of Oklahoma, this the Sooners versus the Cowboys. Which tribe do you belong to? And some actually hate the other. But I mean, often we will do this. We try to take complex people and ideas and we put them in a box and then we crush the box. It's easy, it's lazy, it's very, very human, and we can all be guilty of this. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't feel strongly about the things that are important to us, all right? Nor am I saying that all ideas are equally valid or invalid. But I want to break past identity and talk about the beliefs themselves and how they take root. I'll tell you this, I know that this approach is not working. On the internet especially, but in the streets, screaming at each other is not how we change minds. It's not how we change the world, if that is the goal. The amygdala in our brain, this is the part of our brain that processes emotion. It is linked to threat response, fight or flight or freeze. The same part of our brain, the amygdala, will fire up when confronted with an ideological threat as it does with a physical threat. People feel attacked ideologically. They do the same stuff. That's why they will either blow up, go silent, or just walk out. So what happens when you and I walk up somebody with an identity belief and we say, you are wrong, or that is stupid? We often get the fight, flight, or freeze. They'll go on the defensive, they'll go quiet, they'll lock down, they'll push back, whatever. Maybe they'll get up and run away. This is a human reaction. Nobody's immune to this. And we in the skeptics community like to say that we're above it all. That's crap. We are all capable of doing this. We all have the tendency to get emotional, especially about our values-based beliefs. So with a perceived attack or a real attack, people do what? They retreat to a place where they feel safe, almost always with those who have their backs, right? So the flat earth believer goes back to the flat earth community. The religious person retreats back to their religious circle or a church. Some conspiracy theorist goes back. Even if I'm an atheist activist and someone's going hard at me, I might go back and hang out with some fellow non-religious people because I feel safe in that environment. It's a human thing. And I think if we're going to make a dent in this crazy world, in some ways, we are going to have to be a safe place. We are going to have to, whenever possible, and it's not always, but whenever possible, we're going to have to give our fellow travelers in this world just a little more grace, right? Value and respect, and here, try to de-escalate, try to rehumanize. It is in those moments of safety when connection and conversation actually begin. And I know there's a whole culture of people going, I've written them off, screw them. And I feel that sometimes, and I understand it, but I'm just saying, do we treat people like people out there? Or are we on the internet and we see a stranger represented by a two-dimensional avatar and we didn't even know them, right? We don't see them as personalities, people with characters and families and dreams and lives. Can they be a good person with wrong ideas? Have we ever been good people who had wrong ideas? And if we did that make us subhuman? I don't think so. Is it all about winning? Why am I engaging? People are watching me. My identity's on the line. I'm really committed here. I don't want to look weak or stupid. But is that the goal, to try to Bigfoot somebody else? Am I focused on helping or dominating? What language am I using? Am I turning up the heat, or should I do a better job of trying to de-escalate? Am I sending but not receiving? Maybe the other person, the interlocutor, is not the only brick wall in this discussion. And oh, my fellow libs and heathens hate hearing this one. They're like, well, I'm above it all. And I'm like, well, we're all guilty of not listening, of sending, not receiving. And how much of what is happening is about identity, them defending theirs and me defending mine. There's a research professor and author. Her name is Brene Brown. I like this quote. She said, people are hard to hate close up. Move in. And I take inspiration from people who have humanized their approach and managed to change minds and hearts, even at the extremes. The next time you wonder if somebody can evolve out of a destructive identity belief, remember stories like this guy. Brian Widener. He was a man defined by white supremacy, so much so that he had the symbols of racism tattooed on his body. But he saw the humanity of the other, the people that he had hated, and he walked away from hate. Human rights activist Dia Khan has a documentary called White Right, shows her sitting in the living rooms of white supremacists, having a face-to-face encounter. Many of these racist men, when confronted with her humanity, realized how wrong they'd been, and they left those cultures of hate entirely. This guy's name is Daryl Davis. He fights racism by actually speaking with members of the KKK, and he has convinced dozens of racists to leave the Klan. There's a documentary about his life. It's called Accidental Courtesy. It's fascinating. I would have been easy meat when I was younger. I wrote a whole book about my former identity as a true blue Fox News, Rush Limbaugh, right-wing Tea Party, Christian Nation conservative. If I'd been attacked as stupid or evil, would I even be here today? Or would I have seen people dehumanizing me and I said, I want nothing to do with them? Nothing to do with those people. This approach is not sexy, it is not flashy, it is not easy. But I'll say this much, screaming in the streets and typing screw you on the internet, it's just not working. It's not how we fix the world. I think we all have to admit our humanity, that we've been wrong about things in our lives. Let's have conversations about whatever, from MSG to vaccines to AI to governments to religions. Let's try to engage the heart and not lose our heart. Let's use our listening ears. Let's activate our empathy centers. I think if we are prepared to be vulnerable in all the best ways, understanding how the brain is working, we might just find or produce the crack that lets in the light. I think if there is light, that's when you and I can really and truly see. And that is my presentation for you today. I'm honored to have been here, and I hope you've enjoyed it.
Thank you, Seth. We've got a couple of minutes for some Q&A. So if you have a question for our speaker, put it in the chat and I will highlight and pass on that question to our speaker.
I don't know that I have any great wisdom, but maybe I can help continue a conversation about some of these issues as well. I do have my coffee, so that does fuel the synapses. I think there's a scientific finding that says something like that. If there's not, there should be. So.
The chat is long and full. Oh, here we are. We have do ego and distrust combine to create a fear response?
Well, I'm not a psychologist, but I think I think it depends on your interlocutor. Sometimes ego feeds a sense of superiority and they're not afraid. Maybe they're just wrong. Maybe they're insecure. Maybe they're bigoted, you know. I think other people, it's funny when I've engaged, and I've done, 16 years of this as a non-believer, a lot of people, when they come at me and they're trying to convince me of whatever it is they're trying to convince me of, sometimes I feel like they're actually trying to convince themselves. Like they're so uncomfortable that somebody in the room doesn't buy it or doesn't agree, that they're desperate to have everybody around them agree. And if not, I think it rattles their own cages, whether they admit it or not. But there are a squillion reasons, I think, why people resist.
We have a really timely question from Phyllis. So she's asking, shouldn't we oppose people who are doing evil things to others? How do we,
Whoops.
what is the right response when we're handling situations where people are in imminent mortal danger? How do we approach these people? And is encountering them appropriate for a situation like that?
Well,
When
I
there's
never said
imminent.
we shouldn't do battle. Forgive me. I've got Linus, who I referenced earlier, barking in the background. Natalie just came home, and they know the garage door means goodies. No, no, no. I think we have to do fierce battle against the agents of harm in this world. And I think there are many people where the house is on fire, we are going to have to go at them with a fire hose. We're going to, we have to do what we must do to protect our fellow human beings. But it's nuanced. I think I was once a Fox News Christian. I was once a Christian Nation guy, and I don't think I would have bought into all the insanity that's going on here. But I am saying that there are many ways to resist. And sometimes we have to go hard, but sometimes I think we overreact or we do things that actually cause others to double down. But as far as being a resistance, and I'm speaking about this right at the American Atheist Convention coming up in 3 weeks, I do think, what's that line? When injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty. And I think, we're not weak, we're not soft, we're not doing a mamby-pamby, let's all hold hands, buy a Coke, and kumbaya each other. I think we do have to go strong to protect other human beings. But I don't think it's binary. More than one thing can be true at the same time. And I think we have to try to engage the culture even as we fight injustice.
I'm going to combine a few questions together for the end of our Q&A. So what was it like transitioning from the ultra Christian community to the atheist community. What are some of your heroes for reaching on to the other side? Do you groups like Braver Angels, for example?
You know, my story is far too. I wrote a book about it. Not that I'm trying to sell the book, but my book Deconverted chronicles my journey out of fundy Christianity. And I was a Youth for Christ spokesman, and I was a youth leader, and I was an adult leader, and I was a Christian broadcaster, and I produced fundraising videos for churches around the country, and that journey out was tough. I think most of it, though, it came down to giving myself permission. A lot of people don't think they have permission or should give them, they think it's egotistical to give themselves permission to tap on the glass and say, hey, how sound is this? Or maybe there's cultural pressures. I don't want to lose my family, my kids, my parents will freak out. There's a ton of reasons, reinforcers, some by design. But, coming out of that culture, for me, really more became less about being part of an atheist culture, and it became more about giving myself the gift of authenticity. My life isn't necessarily easier as a non-religious person, but I'm so much more comfortable and fulfilled, and I just don't feel like I'm jamming the square peg into the round hole. And I really tell people that an authentic life is a gift that you give to yourself every single day. And because I think we have evidence for one life, you have to give yourself permission to live that life on your terms because there may be no tomorrow.
Thank you so much for your words.
Very kind.
So if you were inspired today, learn something new, or if you'll stay to connect with new or lifelong friends in these breakout sessions, we're going to come up a little soon. I'll put up the slide for our donation slide. I hope that you'll consider supporting all the society's platforms with a donation. Let's see here. Your donation supports great speakers like Seth, who further the union's mission to nurture and inspire ethical communities and create a world that is democratic, compassionate, just, and sustainable. I hope that you will give as generously as possible to support the ongoing work of the American Ethical Union. However you can give, thank you for your support today. We're very, very grateful.
Time.
Thank you.
How can I get a voice like yours?
I know it's funny. I don't know when it changed. It changed when I was in school, and I don't know. It's really a style over substance kind of thing. But it has served me well, and I think we're in a movement that needs. I think in hard discussions, it's rare that data points move people. I think we really can change minds with storytelling. And there are a lot of people who are nervous that, well, I don't want to be manipulated. I don't want my emotions to be a part of it. I think that's a lie. There's no way to remove emotions from the important discussions. It's okay to feel something about the things we think about. I think we just don't let emotion lead us around by the nose. But a way to tap into both the emotive and the intellectual at the same time is to approach many of these issues through stories. And I certainly think that may be one thing I brought to the movement in the last 15 years.
I'm a professor of voice and diction. I've written 20 books on social justice. You are so articulate, Seth. You are one of the most articulate, clear speakers I have ever witnessed. And I'm not just flattering you, because this is terribly important at this juncture in our U.S. history.
Wow. Well, I'm honored. Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to ask about the idea of flat earthers, where flat earth is sometimes used in the anti-science as an anti-science meme, and then it's also used as a kind of globalist meme. Everybody is, 2 seconds away from China or getting something from Indonesia. And it's very interesting how they play together.
Fascinating. Good question.
Well, when I was a devout believer, the one world government was part of the narrative for the apocalypse. And we were very schizophrenic about the end times because on one side of our mouths, we were like, come Lord Jesus, we can't wait for the rapture. And then all of a sudden, then we'd flip out about anything that looked like the end times. Oh my God, Satan's under every rock. The book of Revelation come to pass, the whore of Babylon, and the one world government. So we'd flip out. And part of me is like, now I wondered, well, wouldn't I have been excited? Because the more we saw the inevitable apocalypse come to pass, that would be one step closer to my eternity with Jesus in heaven, which was really what I wanted. But even when I was a believer, they showed a series of films, apocalyptic films produced in the 70s and 80s called A Thief in the Night. And this was fear porn. They showed depictions of people disappearing by the millions during the rapture. And then those left behind had to go through the meat grinder of something called the tribulation, which is where Satan is given control of the earth for 7 years. And that earth, the satanic earth, had no boundary lines for nations. It was one world. And for some reason, in the faith, we were terrified of a united humanity. We thought, well, that's a betrayal of America, which is our nation under God. And two, if there is a one world government, it would probably be run by the Antichrist. It was very conspiratorial thinking. There's some xenophobia, I think, involved there, and some other factors. Now, as a non-believer in religions, I've gone a lot of, I'm John Lennon. Imagine all humanity living life in peace, joining together to build the good. I still have that dream. I mean, it's a dream worth having, but it's a dream for sure.
Seth, my name's Rich Feldman. I hope you can hear my question.
Yes.
It's mainly about identifying the kinds of tendencies toward ideas different from your own in ourselves and the kinds of reactions you described. And I think you did mention this, but I'm a philosophy professor. I've written a number of books about reasoning and critical thinking and the like. But it's all put to the test recently. There's a new book by two Princeton political scientists about the COVID response. And their argument is that all the non-pharmaceutical responses, the school closures and a lot of the shutting down, were actually counterproductive, and that there was evidence prior to the pandemic about how to deal with such things that indicated that, but that there was a kind of closed-minded and closing of the ranks around the response that we actually instituted. And it was very interesting. And the reason I mention it here is I found in myself all the tendencies you talked about, sort of getting angry and wanting not to listen. I resisted and listened for a while, but it's hard. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about sort of identifying this in yourself and how to deal.
Well, I myself, when I look at lockdown, again, this is an example of, I'm not trying to be a politician as much, but I think more than one thing can be true at the same time. I know that lockdowns caused some blowback. I know that it harmed a lot of people. Businesses went under, people were financially devastated, but I saw them as victims of the pandemic. In the larger picture, I mostly became struck by how everybody in this, I say everybody, so many people in the United States love to bleat about freedom, but they hate talking about responsibility. And I thought about what a privilege it should be for us to say, I'm going to wear a mask if there's any chance that I'm going to help protect somebody next to me who might be vulnerable, immunocompromised. I'm going to alter the way I do business to adjust to this new norm till we get through a deadly pandemic, because I want to be a part of a collective and to help and as I have been given freedoms to do this and that, I also really accept the responsibilities that come with being a human being and a member of our culture. And I think I grieve that. I don't know if that's remotely an answer to your question, but that's what I took away from a lot of the resistance to mask mandates and lockdowns and shieldings and other preventatives. I mostly saw people make it about, well, me. And my hope, my dream would have been it's about us, and all of us. And I didn't see nearly enough of that.
So just to follow up very quickly, my question was not really about the COVID response. It was about seeing in myself, in this case, some of the kinds of resistance to new information of the very sort that you were talking about.
Oh, sure.
And I think all of us do that sometimes. And I think we often think, well, we're not doing the sorts of things you're talking about. We're just being reasonable. But I think we are guilty, all of us are guilty of the kinds of things that you're thinking about. And my question was more about how to recognize that in yourself and how to get past it.
Oh, you're right. It's funny. I don't know if anybody here has seen the old 1980s film, The Highlander, but it's I love it. But it's about a series of human beings that are actually immortal. And over the course of centuries, they do battle with each other until only one remains. And that remaining last immortal receives the prize, which is they know everything and they're all powerful. They essentially become a god. And I've seen some people who have exited bad cultures or bad idea cultures, and they act like they received the prize. Now I am above it all. And no, we're all emotional bags of, meat covered skeletons. You know what I'm saying? We're all knee jerky primates. And I'll tell you, my wife will tell you, I can be just as guilty. And the only sort of inoculation or preventative or a way to mute that has been to be aware of it, to walk in and say, okay, why am I viscerally reacting? How much of this is rooted to what I've always known? Am I in a bad mood? Am I pot committed or really invested in this idea? And this has applied across the board. And I've come to the point now. Here's an example. When I talk to religious people, apologists, often in really good faith, we have great discussions about, is there a God, and who is that God, and what does that God want? And I try to lead with, make this guarantee. If evidence for God exists, if I am presented with something compelling, I promise you that I will commit to changing my mind on this, and that I will be honest about it. But I don't always do that with everything, and I think that just makes us human. Being aware of how our brains approach contrary and often uncomfortable ideas is the only defense I've known. It's imperfect, but it's all I got.
Could I ask you to comment on anti-racism rhetoric when talking about white privilege? Do you think that that's useful and helpful to race relations?
Well, talk about identities and tribalism, right? I myself have done a lot of presenting about how I am mostly in the most privileged class in the United States. It's funny. I did an interview with Dr. Robert Jones, who wrote a book about white supremacy in this country and the ripple effects that it has even today, and how it feeds into Christian nationalist ideologies and narratives out there. I think we have to address the fact that we live in a society which has been largely male, white, cis, hetero, Christian for so long that if someone says, well, let's all be colorblind, it's a lovely notion, but I think, no, we're still seeing systemic generational consequences, and we're seeing white supremacy still a threat to us today. And there are going to be defensive people who think that DEI and those programs are an attack on white people. People who have enjoyed a position of power and privilege are terrified of becoming the minority, perhaps terrified of being treated the way they treated minorities in their own life.
That's what's happening big time right now. That's it.
I myself think it's necessary to speak to who has benefited the most in our history. How is that generationally spilling down into our present and future? And how do we make a world that looks less like me and more like all of us? I think that those are discussions that must be had.
May I ask you, please, can I speak? why you decided to be an atheist rather than an agnostic. When I was 11, I was so into Jesus Christ until my nephew that I was babysitting died a crib death. Not when I was there, but it turned me away from religious belief altogether. However, I could never totally become an atheist because nobody knows what happened before the Big Bang, scientifically speaking. And Neil deGrasse Tyson says that's why God has never been kicked off his throne. So I have chosen agnosticism over atheism because I'm in awe and wonder of the incredible life and human body and universe and what is it all about. So I don't see agnosticism as a weakness. I see it as no other choice. So I wonder how you can choose atheism.
Well, we may be talking about two different things. I don't think we choose our beliefs in that way. Like if I woke up and I said tomorrow I choose to believe in not believe in gravity, in my mind I will still know. And atheism is not the declaration that there is no God. It's that I just don't believe.
I
And I
just
think
realized the word is really just anti belief in God, but it doesn't say you can't be wondering and awe of other things.
I think awe and wonder is a different conversation. In my mind, I know that the Christian God does not exist. We've reverse engineered Christianity. We know that mythology. I know that the Islamic God is human made. I know that various religions like Mormonism, et cetera, we can go back. But the larger question is there something or someone out there? I'm interested in that. But because I simply do not believe, I've seen no evidence. I myself go with atheists. Some people go with agnostics. Some people say that they don't like a label. I really don't care. I think the more important thing is that you're taking a journey honestly on your term and you can use whatever label that you want.
Thank
We have
you
a,
very much.
My name
we have
is
a question from Laura.
I'd like to speak, please. Thank you. My name is Rita Wilson. I come from the Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture.
Hey.
This is an outstanding discussion, excellent talk. Appreciate you a lot and expect to hear from my board president, my Sunday committee chairperson, and I'm speaking for my group at the moment. We would just love this kind of conversation. We would just love this kind of discussion. We've had similar. This is outstanding.
You're very kind. Thank you. Yeah.
And my president is Tom, and my chairperson is Vondra. So expect to hear from them.
Very kind. Thank you.
Mhm.
We have a question from Laura. How do we reach people who have really gone in the direction of from the direction of logic and reason to fake news and dehumanizing conduct with people? How do we reach them? And a follow-up question from someone else, how do we ourselves break up identitarian identity, marriage between our ideas and our identity in ourselves? How do we do that self-work?
The answer, I think, is that you drive to your interlocutor's house and you grab them by the shoulders and you shake them vigorously and say, "What the hell is wrong with you?" Which is something we may fantasize about in moments of frustration, but I'm lying. We should not actually do that. I think your question really can be more broadly stated. How do we fix the world? Right? And this is the question. And I wrestle with it, post-election, and I don't want to get too political here, but because my values have been under attack and many of the people and causes I care about, I feel are under tremendous attack and in great danger. I, in some ways, am enraged, rightly so. And I'm like, how many years? How many examples? How many instances? Where's the bottom? And then I came to this, I thought, well, maybe there is no bottom. And then I began to write people off and I started to lock down my social circle just because how can I break bread with people who are actively harming the things and causes I care about? And then on the other hand, I'll flip the next day and say, no, I've got to continue to engage. I've got to continue not just to curse the darkness, but to shine some light. I've got to try not to give up in despair, which is what they want. Many in the opposing camp want us to just surrender and give up and go home. I've got to continue to stand up, as exhausting as it might be for the things I care about. And I oscillate. I mean, I really have. Part of me thinks there are some people who are freaking unreachable. If somebody can reach them, they're better people than me. I'm done. And then I'll flip around and say, no, I can't give up. I've got to continue to try to pound the drum and create the crack that lets in the light. But I don't know. I don't know what, there's no magic bullet. And that's the frustrating part.
Yes.
So for me, it's been case by case. When I see someone, I think, is there a chance? Or who else might be watching who might see the ideas presented, even if my interlocutor is a closed system? What's the cost benefit on engaging? Am I in the right mindset? And I just try to go person by person, case by case in a very, very imperfect way, doing the best I can. And I think we all are out there.
I'll phrase it like this, and this is a way that I've seen express the issue, is that for so many people, their identity with their theology, their belief in a God and an afterlife means that giving up God, giving up their practice means dying. If they don't believe in God, if they don't please the God that they believe exists, they will die. And so what often we're finding ourselves asking people to do is to accept death and die and turn away from a belief that if they continue with what they're doing, they will never die. How do we overcome a mental block like that?
Well, you speak to something too, if I can build on it, and I'd welcome your input or anybody else's.
Please do.
Most people, I'm convinced, are not part of a church culture for reasons of theology. They are for reasons of identity and community, right? What are the two major determiners for someone's religious affiliation? Where were you born? What's the religion of your parents? And you can break this down. Protestantism in the United States, if you go to Mexico, Catholic, right? You can call that. Saudi Arabia, big mystery, Muslim. If you go to, Sri Lanka, it's going to be Buddhism. You think, well, okay, these are families, these are cultures. This is who they know. This is who welcomes them on Sunday mornings and has coffee ready and gives them a big hug. This is their friends circle. This is childcare for their kids. These are the people who come to the hospital to visit them. If they then have a harder conversation about, is the Bible true or myth? It's not really about true or myth. It's what will I lose if I have that hard conversation and the answer turns out to be myth? Your whole platform that you're standing on could fall away beneath your feet. And I've struggled sometimes with some of my fellow atheist activists who really, really, really go hard at religious people. I'm actually doing a second speech that talks about some of the worst arguments that we bring to the table as atheists. Religion is a mental illness and they're just all a bunch of sheeple and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, no, no. I mean, we're talking about largely lovely people, intelligent people, good people who are doing their best to live good lives. And I think we have to see them with compassion.
Yes.
I understand you want to see your lost child that you lost to cancer in heaven one day. That is a coping. We are great at creating mechanisms for coping. You want to believe that there will be some kind of justice in this unjust world. You want to try to find joy when there is so much despair. We understand how useful religions have been. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily overall beneficial, but I think we have to approach this with empathy and compassion and understand that these are flesh and blood human beings, often trying to live good lives and do the right things. And they have used religion as a way to sort of get through the day. I think our obligation is to try to create an earthbound, human-based, reality-based support system so that they no longer have to lean into fictions and instead can lean into us in the real world.
Oh, yes. And we need to remember that the best part of all these medieval religions is the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The only time it doesn't work is if you're a masochist or a sadist.
We have a question from Greg Patrick, talking about, you had mentioned creating a world based really on fact and truth, where we have a shared understanding of reality. How has math and science illiteracy, and I would add history illiteracy, and as a combat medic and an EMT, I see a lot of medical illiteracy that really harms people. How do we meet and work with coming up against a conversation with someone who is dealing with a lot of simple illiteracy in these matters? Yeah, they don't understand how science comes to conclusions. They have a different, what we call an epistemology, a belief in how we can know and what we can know. For science, we have empiricism. Some people accept revelation. Some people accept personal experience. How do we cross those boundaries?
It's even more difficult when we see oligarch-funded conduits of disinformation. I mean, I had Fox News. I was an officiant at a wedding recently in San Antonio, Texas. Honored to be there to do a humanist wedding. At the hotel, I had a 4 a.m. shuttle, and they have Fox News on in the lobby. And so 15 minutes, I'm sitting there listening to Fox News. And I thought, if I only got my information from this one network, and in my book, Fox News Christian, I reported the statistic that roughly 40% of Trump voters in 2016 got their information about the world from Fox News. And they distrusted the other news. It was Fox News and right-wing radio. If this is all I saw and all I heard, we would not live in a shared reality.
Yes.
That's tough.
So true.
And I don't know how. How do we negate the damage done by the Rupert Murdochs and the Elon Musks of the world? In the larger scale, one of the reasons that I'm a humanist, much more, I don't really identify as an atheist. Atheism is what I don't believe in, right? But humanism is what I am about, human beings. And I
Yes.
think
Me
we
too.
want to go out and find solutions to human problems, because who else is going to do the work?
Yes.
And it's one of the reasons that I really think we have to focus on humanistic causes. So pro-science, meaning we support vaccines, which saves lives, which reduce suffering, which we are reducing homelessness and disease and oppression and all these other things. I think we have to continue to battle to try to reduce misery and suffering in this world for two reasons. I think one, it's the right thing to do, but two, I think then people will be less inclined to lean into even damaging mythologies, because there wasn't a real world solution. I think if we can make this world less miserable, then fewer and fewer people are writing a happy ending out there in space after they die, because they see no relief here on Earth during their present 80-year existence. I think solving real world problems as humanists actually grounds us all further in science, reason, and humanity. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
I think it's wonderful. It's exactly how I feel anyway.
well, I think it's the culture of cruelty that grieves me most.
Yes.
The absurdity and the cruelty really grieve me. There
Yes.
is a sociopathy, and there have been a lot of ink has been spilled about how we seem to be living in a culture of sociopaths, where the people who are dictating terms for everybody else have the empathy centers in them seem to be dead or dormant or not there at all. And boy, just the idea that cruelty has become not just allowed, but even celebrated, sometimes in religious circles. I mean, I'm allies with people like Amanda Tyler from the Baptist Joint Committee. She is founder of Christians Against Christian Nationalism. She is a believer. She loves people. We disagree on the Bible, but we share values. Andrew Whitehead, sociologist, he's a believer, but he stands on my side in terms of trying to eliminate cruelty and be human. And, we share values. Pastor John Pavlovitz, I follow his work. We disagree on the Bible, but we share values. He just wants everybody safe and loved and equal and respected and all those types of things. And so I'm very thankful to see even many in religious circles standing alongside the rest of us as we resist this culture of cruelty. But I'll tell you, to see the Bible bangers they seem to be infatuated with the Old Testament God, the God of jealousy and vengeance and retribution. They just want to punish the wicked. I'm terrified, and it grieves me because where is blessed are the meek? Where is don't love money? Where is don't take revenge because vengeance is mine? Where is the least of these? Where are those teachings in the minds of those supposed Jesus believers? Because I sure don't see it.
Thank you so much, Seth.
Sure.
On that note, we're going to close out the platform for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for such a lively participation, your etiquette and your decorum, welcoming Seth into our community, and sponsoring such a wonderful conversation with him.
And I'm thankful for this organization. I think you are representing how it can and should be done, where you are really about inclusivity instead of locking people out. You want to unite people in terms of humanity and living ethical, moral, good, value-based lives, trying to build a better world. And I have so much respect for that and for you as a group. And it's such an honor to have been part of the day. And so for what it's worth, a big thank you from me and my family to you. And thanks for your time and attention. It's been so good to be here today.